A chilly morning in mid-September, a silver SUV pulled up in front of Milbrook High's main gate. The back door opened slowly, and stepping out was a black girl, 18 years old, with a calm face, deep eyes, and a lean figure like an athlete. She carried a simple backpack, wore a charcoal hoodie and dark jeans. Nothing that stood out at first glance, but every step she took on the grey brick pavement was firm, as if nothing could shake her. Her name was Brielle Johnson. She came from Detroit, where nightfall brought the sound of ambulance sirens, mingling with fistfights in the parking lot behind the apartment complex. She came to Milbrook with only one wish: to live in peace. No trouble, no spotlight, no pity. No one here knew that for the past 8 years she had practiced karate every morning at 5:30 a.m. Her black belt wasn't just a strip of cloth tied around her waist, but a symbol of thousands of hours of sweat, blood, and tears. Those gentle hands could deflect a right hook by reflex and shatter prejudice with unshakable calm. She had lived in neighborhoods where silence was the only way to survive, and she knew one truth: bullies aren't afraid of words. But they fear most the gaze of someone who does not look down. Brielle stepped through the school gates like a quiet stranger, but she didn't know, nor did anyone, that this single step would awaken an entire school, that from this day forward, Milbrook High would never be the same, and that sometimes those who never speak are the very ones who make an entire system fall silent. The first lunch at Milbrook High was like a social map. The standout students and athletic jackets flared like unofficial flags in the center. To the left, the rich kids' AirPods pulsing with the latest Drake. By the windows, the theater group where laughter outnumbered bites of food. Brielle quickly grabbed a sandwich and a milk carton, her eyes sweeping each row of tables for familiar faces. No one invited her, and that was precisely what she hoped for. All she needed was a quiet corner, no looks, no questions. But just as she stepped toward an empty table near the back, a voice rang out, not loud, but just enough for all 3 surrounding rows to fall silent at once. Well, look who just dropped by our town." It was Chad Porter. Red and white varsity football jacket, over 6 feet tall, smile like a TV actor, but eyes cold blue as if trained to spot prey. He stood from his table and walked toward Brielle like he welcomed a recruit into his domain. Behind him stood Brent Cooper, who cracked his knuckles like a warning, and Logan Fields, who always laughed just before things turned ugly. Chad blocked Brielle's path. No touch needed, just a stare and a territorial posture. His message was clear. "I'm talking to you." Brielle stopped, tray still in hand, eyes still fixed on the empty table. But then, as if the cafeteria's noise dissolved, she turned toward him, her gaze steady and unafraid. "Is there a problem?" she asked softly but firmly. Chad smiled. "It's just, here at this school, first-year students usually pay a little fee. We call it a welcome fee, to make sure nothing unexpected happens during the first week." Brent and Logan closed in slightly, the smell of cheap cologne and brewing aggression hovering in the air. Students nearby had stopped eating. All eyes were locked on them, like watching a familiar play unfold. "Fee for what?" Brielle asked, her tone completely disinterested. "Oh, little things. Lockers jamming textbooks, magically disappearing, someone accidentally bumping into you in the hallway." Chad chuckled, a smile many had grown used to dreading. Logan chimed in, "Especially for people who look like they don't belong here." Brielle calmly set her tray on the nearest table. When she turned back, her posture was still soft, as if nothing had happened, but her eyes were different. They were not angry, they were just crystal clear. "I don't pay to be left alone." The air froze. All whispers died. Chad hesitated for a split second, then he chuckled, nodded. "Oh." Everybody says that at first, he said, his voice dropping lower, like the wind before a storm. But eventually they all realize, everyone pays a price. Easy or hard depends on how you choose. Brielle picked up her tray again. Her eyes didn't leave his, not even for a breath. "I don't choose. I decide." And she walked right past him. No bump, no dodge, just one person stepping forward. Chad stood still. Brent squinted. Logan frowned. No one said a word. At a table across the room, Eli Carter watched the scene unfold and whispered to his friend, "She has no idea what she just started." Brielle took a bite of her sandwich like nothing had happened. But inside, she knew that look she had just given the one that didn't look down had stirred a storm, waiting to be unleashed. That afternoon, the bell signaling the end of the second period echoed down the B-wing hallway. Brielle walked toward her locker, carrying her history textbook and a math notebook in her arms. Her eyes, as always, looked straight ahead, no scanning, no sign of alertness. But every movement was precisely controlled. She entered the combination into the lock, gave it a gentle turn. Nothing, tried again. Still jammed. On the third try, she frowned, knelt, looked more closely, and saw it. A wad of chewing gum was stuffed deep into the lock, mushy, as if deliberately pressed in by a finger. Behind her, a voice spoke, sounding like it had nothing to do with anything. These lockers act up a lot, especially the ones with even numbers. Brent Cooper was leaning against the wall, his crooked smirk stretching like a tear in a painting. He held up a pack of chewing gum and shook it. Brielle didn't answer. She pulled out her phone and took a close-up photo, capturing even the fingerprint indentation on the gum. She didn't need proof now, but when the time came, she would have enough. Brent shrugged and turned away. Before disappearing around the corner of the hallway, he called out, "Chad doesn't forget. He likes people to think he did." In American history, Brielle said nothing. She quietly took notes like she did in every class back in Detroit. But when the bell rang, she realized her notebook from yesterday, the one she had carefully kept in her bag, was missing. She checked twice. Nothing. And then, as if part of a well-prepared cruel joke, Logan Fields appeared at the hallway corner with a bunch of underclassmen giggling behind him. In his hand was Brielle's black notebook, and he was reenacting the lesson in a mocking, squeaky voice, reading each line she had written. "Racial injustice is not just historical, it's institutional." "Oh, wow, would you listen to that? Our intellectual lady from Detroit is here." She walked toward him, not fast, not angry, just a girl stepping forward to take back what belonged to her. "Give it back." Logan raised the notebook, swinging it playfully like a game of keep-away. "You want it, jump for it then." A few students giggled. Someone pulled out their phone. Logan noticed, and it only made him more excited. But he didn't expect. Brielle didn't jump. She didn't argue. She pulled out her phone and took a quick photo while he was still holding the notebook aloft, his face in clear view. The bold title, Brielle Johnson Personal Journal, was on the front page. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "Evidence," she replied, slipping her phone back into her hoodie pocket. "In case I need to file a theft report." The hallway fell silent. Logan froze for a split second, then angrily flung the notebook to the floor. Pages scattered like a fan, ripping apart the image of a harmless prank he had tried to portray. Brielle bent down to gather the pages, her eyes still calm as though she was picking up her pride one sheet at a time. And then a pair of silver-white sneakers stepped into view. Eli Carter, the quiet boy, the one who had whispered, "She doesn't know what she just started," back in the cafeteria, stood beside her, eyes scanning the hallway before crouching to help gather the papers. "You want some advice?" Eli asked softly, as if afraid to be heard. Brielle nodded slightly. "I'm listening. Chad's not the kind of guy who bullies out of boredom. He is the system. His dad owns 4 businesses in town. His uncle is the chief of police. And Logan and Brent, they're just tools. Everything he does is calculated. Even how he drags victims through each trap, like a cat toying with mice." Brielle stood up, the papers pressed tightly to her chest. "You trying to scare me?" No, Eli met her eyes. "I'm trying to keep you around longer than a week." But Brielle didn't back down. She didn't run. She only glanced back at the hallway where Logan was still glaring and whispered to herself, "I wasn't born to bow to that system." 7th period, American literature class. Brielle sat in the 3rd row to the left of the whiteboard. She always chose seats with a wide view, but not too exposed. Yet today the fluorescent lights seemed colder, the air heavier, and the stares from the rows behind her felt like silent needles pricking her back. "Today we'll be discussing To Kill a Mockingbird," said Miss Patterson, a petite silver-haired woman known for her strictness. Who would like to share their thoughts on the themes of justice and prejudice in the novel? A few seconds of silence. Then a hand rose, none other than Chad Porter. The teacher nodded. "I think it'd be exciting to hear the opinion of our new transfer student," he said, his tone even and polite. The whole class turned to look at Brielle. Some eyes held sympathy, others waited for drama. Ms. Patterson nodded. Brielle, would you like to share? She gave a slight nod. Didn't stand, but her voice rang clear. Harper Lee didn't just tell a story about injustice against black people in the Old South. She posed a bigger question. When we witness injustice, do we stay silent or speak out even when the cost is high? The room was dead silent. I believe prejudice isn't just in laws, it lives in our looks, words, and even indifference, Brielle added. Her eyes didn't settle on anyone, but everyone felt seen. When she finished, Chad clapped slowly. Oh, how profound, he said, with a smile leaning back. I must say, very impressed with her expression. Very clear, especially coming from… He trailed off. The whole class understood. Everyone heard the implication, but no one dared say it aloud. Some looked down, some bit their lips. It was a cruel strike, no crude words, but soaked in racial condescension. Ms. Patterson stood still for a few seconds, her face flushed, but she said nothing. Brielle, on the other hand, didn't even blink. Thank you, she replied evenly. I'm glad you appreciate my ability to express myself. Chad stiffened briefly, then smirked. Truthfully, it's rare, because someone once said people from certain backgrounds aren't usually great at academic discussion. And you think background determines ability? Brielle asked. Her eyes are no longer soft like a blade slicing through the fake shell of civility. People from any background can surprise you if you're humble enough to reflect on yourself. The class held its breath. No one spoke. No one moved. The bell rang right on time, like a rescue for the faint-hearted. Brielle gathered her books, stood up, and left steps, steady, unhurried. Behind her, Chad growled to Logan and Brent. She thinks she's smarter than us. But what he didn't know, every word he had just said revealed the weakness hiding beneath that varsity jacket. And the scariest thing for bullies isn't getting punched. It's being outmatched in front of everyone by intellect calm and by a gaze that refuses to bow. Friday morning, Milbrook's dawn was dreary, as if the sky held its breath for what was about to unfold. Brielle arrived at school earlier than usual, wearing the same charcoal hoodie and worn-out backpack. As she turned down the main hallway toward her locker, the chatter of gathered students gradually faded. Some froze in place. A few girls covered their mouths, glanced ahead, then turned away, not out of surprise, but out of embarrassment. Then she saw it in her locker. Someone had taped a ripe banana to it, crooked as if deliberately meant to mock. Below the banana, scrawled in red ink, like dripping blood, were the words, "Welcome to the jungle," a blatant racist prank. No justification, no misunderstanding possible. Brielle paused for a moment. Then she peeled off the banana, rolled up the tape, and tucked them into her hoodie pocket, like picking up trash, leaving no trace on the cold metal door. No expression, no dramatic reaction, only calm, the kind of calm that sears guilt into others' hearts. Not a fan of my gift. The voice came from behind, loud enough for nearby students to hear. Chad Porter, flanked by Brent and Logan, striding forward as if to perform at a show starring himself. I thought you'd feel at home. Detroit right bananas and monkeys galore, he said, feigning laughter. A few nearby students chuckled weakly. The rest fell silent, not out of fear for Brielle, but because they realized he'd gone too far. Brielle closed her locker slowly, then turned to face him. Creative, she said, but next time write more legibly. Sloppy handwriting is easy to trace. Her tone was soft as a breeze, yet her words struck the hallway like thunder. Chad's face froze. For the first time, he couldn't muster a comeback. Seems like you need a lesson in respect, he growled, trying to reclaim his dominance. Maybe you need to learn what it means to respect another person. A wave of whispers swept the corridor. Phones appeared silently recording. Brent stepped forward. Who the hell do you think you are talking like that? I am someone who refuses to stay silent while rotten people impose decay as law. She didn't shout. She didn't protest. Yet every word she spoke, every steady look she gave, froze the world around them for a heartbeat. And believe me, she continued stepping back half a pace, her gaze sweeping across every phone raised in recording. If you still don't understand the meaning of justifiable defense, I'll teach you. Next time, I won't just record. No one laughed. No one could, because the chill in her voice wasn't a threat. It was a warning from someone who had endured everything and refused to tolerate another second of abuse. Chad ground his teeth. He knew any reaction would only seal his defeat. Brielle walked down the hallway like someone who had already claimed her ground. And in that thick atmosphere of simmering fear and outrage, everyone felt one thing clearly: the power game Chad had rigged years ago had just cracked. The sun set slowly behind the maples lining the schoolyard that late afternoon. Its golden light stretched across the empty parking lot, an attempt to prolong peace by a few more minutes, before it was torn apart. Brielle exited the main building, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. She paused under the overhang, gazing out over the vast lot filled with SUVs, pickups, and coupes lined up like prized possessions of wealthy kids, polished, orderly, and cold. At its center stood Chad Porter, flanked by Brent Cooper and Logan Fields, as if they had been waiting all day. They laughed loudly, the sunlight glinting off Chad's still-worn sunglasses despite the dimming sky. They were performing their usual act, but something felt different today. A small crowd of students had gathered at a distance, staring intently as Brielle approached. She dropped her bag at the curb. Without a word, she walked toward them, step by measured step, neither fast nor slow, as if she were walking into a test she had rehearsed since turning 10. Chad saw her from afar. His smile froze, shifting into a sneer. Well finally decided to say hi. She stopped about 10 feet away. The hoodie fluttered in the breeze. Her dark eyes shone calmly, and Brent and Logan glanced at each other. "I'm here to end this," Brielle's voice rang out, not loud, but every word precise. "This charade, this threat, this sick game. Chad arched his brow. "Who do you think you are? This is my school. You're just a stray who thinks karate gives you bragging rights." "I don't need bragging. I need you to understand I will not bow." Chad stepped forward. Brent and Logan closed in. Chad lowered his voice, dripping sarcasm. 3 against 1. "You sure?" Brielle didn't step back. She didn't blink. She adjusted her stance, rooted foot, pivoted body, like the thousands of times she had drilled in a tiny Detroit dojo. "I didn't start this, but I will finish it." Chad growled and lunged, aiming to grab her shoulder. But he never touched her. Brielle pivoted, grabbed his wrist, spun continuously, and threw him onto the asphalt with flawless precision. Brent charged, but Brielle tripped him with a heel sweep. He crashed into the rear of an SUV, knocking his head against the bumper. Logan froze before he could react. Brielle's elbow blocked his chest, and he staggered back. Chad rose, rage-flushed, speechless, jokeless, only raw fury remaining. "Who the hell do you think you are?" He lunged like a wild animal. But Brielle sidestepped, pivoted with her toe, yanked his arm off balance, and slammed him again onto the hard asphalt. Chad lay face down, gasping. Brielle knelt on his shoulder, not to strike, not to shout, but to ask, "Are you done?" Silence. "Done." She pressed softly at his side. He groaned, breathless. "I'm done." She stood up, didn't look at him again. Instead, she scanned the crowd, phones held high, eyes wide and formally bowed, faces frozen in shock. She turned and retrieved her bag, swinging it over her shoulder. A student in the small crowd whispered, "She just destroyed the system." And she did. That day, in the stunned stillness of Milbrook's parking lot, Brielle Johnson didn't just beat 3 bullies. She shattered something far bigger: collective silence, once and for all. 3:00 a.m. The screen of Brielle's phone lit up repeatedly on the nightstand. Messages, notifications, shares, comments. The video of the parking lot fight, captured from 3 different angles, edited with dramatic music, had gone viral like a wildfire. In less than 12 hours, the clip titled "Black Belt Girl Destroys 3 Bullies in Parking Lot and Walks Away Like a Queen" had surpassed 500,000 views. In the dim light of the screen, Brielle sat up, scrolling through the flood of comments. "Who is she? My school has Chads like this. We need a Brielle here. She didn't just fight, she knew when to fight. First time I've seen someone strike the system, not just the people. Milbrook High has a new hero." She let out a slow breath, not from exhaustion, but from understanding. From this moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Milbrook High. The main lobby was more crowded than usual. But there were no loud laughs, no scattered gossip. Just a strange current in the air, like the entire school had stepped into a new chapter without knowing what to call it. Brielle walked in. No phone, no earbuds, no lowered gaze, and for the first time, there were no sneers, no hostility, only respect, or at the very least, caution. Eli Carter stood in the corner, nodding at her, saying nothing, just tapping his chest once in silent salute, like a fighter acknowledging another before a match. Down the east hallway, two girls waited for her. Alyssa Brooks, petite with blonde hair, and Tiana Gray, a soft-spoken girl who usually walked with her head down. "Hi, Brielle." Alyssa said, voice low, hesitant. We wanted to ask you something. It's important." Brielle stopped. Her expression softened. "Go on." Tiana clutched the strap of her backpack tightly. "Yesterday, 3 students from Riverside stopped us at the bus stop. They laughed, grabbed my bag, threw it in the sewer, and called us unwanted trash." Alyssa added quickly, "They said they'd come back today, and, if we told anyone, no bus would ever take us home again." Brielle stood silent. Her eyes were calm, but her spine straightened like a coiled spring. "And what do you want from me?" Her voice neither blaming nor pushing. Tiana whispered, "We don't want someone to fight for us. We need you to be there, so that they know you're there." 3:15, Maple Street bus stop. Brielle nodded, no more questions, but inside her every muscle had drawn tight like a bowstring. Not from fear, but because now she was the name that both the strong and the vulnerable remembered. At the same time, in a private group chat called The Kings, Chad Porter typed his next move. "She thinks she won, but next round no cameras, no audience. We'll show her who runs this school." But he was wrong. Because ever since Brielle Johnson walked into that parking lot and dropped 3 bullies to the pavement, every silenced student at Milbrook had begun to awaken. They were done enough staying quiet. And the system Chad once ruled like a king was cracking wide open. Because of one silent girl who knew how to fight and refused to kneel. 3:10 p.m., Maple Street bus stop. The quiet street shimmered under the late afternoon sun. Autumn winds danced through the trees, casting long shadows across the sidewalk covered in golden leaves. The scent of warm ink from the nearby print shop mingled with the faint smell of bread from the corner bakery. Brielle Johnson stood alone. No weapons, no martial arts uniform. Just a grey hoodie, hands in her pockets, eyes watching the asphalt calmly. Beside her stood Alyssa and Tiana, huddled together. Nervous eyes scanned their surroundings. They didn't speak. They just knew today they were not alone. 3:22 p.m. The first sound wasn't a bus engine, but blaring rap music. A beat-up Camaro rolled into view, tires skimming the curb before screeching to a halt like a challenge. 3 boys stepped out. Zach Ellis, bleached hair, tall frame, eyes narrowed with arrogance. Jared Price, arms covered in tattoos, jacket unzipped, stomping like he owned the pavement. Ryan Dalton, snake-like eyes, smiling lips, voice sharp as blades. They spotted Brielle, and their body language shifted instantly. "Well, well, Justice League's here," Zach sneered. "We're just waiting for the bus," Alyssa replied quickly. "Looks more like you're filming a TED Talk," Jared mocked, tapping Tiana's backpack. Ryan stepped too close to Tiana again, eyes cold with intent. "Not scared anymore, huh?" "She's not scared," Brielle said. She stepped forward now, entirely between the 2 girls and the 3 boys. "And from now on, no one here has to be." Zach moved closer, voice dropping. "You think the 3 of us are scared of one girl?" "No," Brielle replied calmly. "I think you're just not used to meeting someone who can defend herself." "Today's a good day to start." Jared snorted. "You think you're a superhero? I'm not a superhero," she said. "I'm the last line before you cross a line you can't return from." Ryan reached to grab Alyssa's backpack, but caught nothing. In a blink, Brielle intercepted his wrist, twisted it backward, pulled him off balance, and spun him away with a hip check. Ryan cried out. Jared lunged. Zach swung wide from the left, but Brielle was already moving. She swept Jared's leg, and he crashed down onto the sidewalk. She dodged Zach's punch with a half-inch tilt, then countered with a clean crossbody arm swipe, striking his collarbone. All 3 crumpled. Ryan backed away, clutching his wrist. "Are you done?" Brielle asked. No anger, no fear, just that steady, unshakable resolve. Behind her, Alyssa had her phone out. I recorded it all, from the moment Ryan reached for Tiana. Zach growled, "You don't know who we are." "I do," Brielle cut in. "Three grown boys who pick on girls, and now you're going viral. Instagram, YouTube, maybe even the next school board meeting." Ryan hissed, "You'll regret this." "Wrong." Brielle locked eyes with him. "You will regret thinking bullying is power, and silence is consent." Zach staggered up. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "I don't care," she said, slowly, firmly. "And if I ever see you near this stop again, I won't have to touch you. This community will handle the rest." The Camaro peeled off. The bullies said nothing. 5:00 p.m. Alyssa uploaded the video. Title: Karate Girl protects two girls from being harassed again. #We're not afraid. In 2 hours, it hit 100,000 views. In 8 hours, 1 million. Brielle Johnson, once just a girl trying to finish high school, peacefully had become the voice for thousands of silenced students. No crown was placed on her head, no title handed down, but with hands not raised to punch, but to protect. She was chosen. By those who had once feared, just like she once did. Monday morning, the air at Milbrook High was heavy like early fog that hadn't yet lifted. At the main office, Principal Rachel Adams had just stepped through the glass doors when she saw Ms. Kim, the administrative secretary, looking pale, clutching a stack of documents as thick as a semester's syllabus. "We have a problem," Ms. Kim said flatly, skipping any greeting. "What kind of problem?" 12 anonymous bullying complaints have been submitted through the system since Saturday, and 8 calls have been made from parents. And, she lowered her voice, a student-initiated petition demanding a mandatory self-defense course. Over 300 signatures so far. Principal Adams didn't have time to reply. The office phone rang 3 times in 5 minutes. A single A4 sheet had been posted in the hallway on the central bulletin board. It read, "Justice for Brielle and all of us." Beneath it was a QR code linking to the video Alyssa had filmed at the Maple bus stop. It had already surpassed 3 million views, and under every comment were hundreds of other students sharing their stories. In class, Brielle had just stepped inside when nearly 10 students walked up to her, not for autographs, not to gawk. "Can you teach me how to push someone off if I'm pinned to the wall?" one younger girl whispered. "I want to learn how to escape if someone grabs my wrist," another added. "I don't want to fight," said a third, "but I'm tired of being afraid every day." Brielle looked at the faces of the kids who weren't weak. They had never been taught how to be strong. "After school, 5 p.m. Gymnasium," she said. "But remember this is not a fight club. It's a space where we learn to stop bowing our heads." Meanwhile, shadows danced under the yellow lights across town in a dim 24-hour diner as a small group huddled in whispers. Chad Porter sat with his cap flipped backward, a bruise still fading under his left eye. Brent Cooper had gauze wrapped around his hand. Across from them sat Zach Ellis, Jared Price, and Ryan Dalton from Riverside High. On the table, a phone played footage of Brielle locking Ryan down and slamming Jared into the curb. "She's making us look like fools," Chad hissed through gritted teeth. "We can't touch her now," Zach muttered. "Cameras, students, social media, sir. They're all on her side." Brent leaned forward. "So what, we roll over?" Chad shook his head, eyes darkening. "No. We don't beat her with fists. We use the law. We use influence. We rewrite the story." He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Dad, I need to speak with the family lawyer. A girl at school is disrupting the system, and we need to bring it back under control. Legally." But Chad didn't know that. Back at Milbrook's gymnasium, Coach David Bennett stood silently in the observation room, looking down at the training floor. Over 30 students, boys and girls, gathered. Former victims. Kids who just wanted to stop being afraid. Brielle Johnson stood in the middle of the circle, not like a teacher, but like one of them. "I'm not here to teach you how to hurt people," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "I'm here to remind you, you have the right to exist without fear." Applause followed, not loud but solid. And that was the beginning of a new kind of battle, not fought with fists, but with awakening, with unity. But the bullies were preparing a more insidious strike: accusations, lies, legal warfare, not to bruise the body, but to destroy her name. A new war had begun. No longer a girl versus 3 bullies, but truth. Against a system designed to protect lies. Friday, 7:45 a.m., Milbrook High gates. The sky had turned grey, signaling a storm not born of weather. Brielle Johnson had just stepped off the school bus when she noticed something was wrong. Not because students were staring, that was nothing new, but because the people staring today wore suits, sunglasses, and stood beside an unmarked black SUV. Miss Brielle Johnson came a voice cold and smooth as a metal table. "I'm Inspector Roy Daniels. You are being served a subpoena from the Riverside Police Department related to allegations of assaulting a minor." Brielle frowned. "You mean the 3 boys who attacked me and 2 other girls at the bus stop?" "I'm just enforcing a court order," the inspector replied, unfazed. "You're being charged with unnecessary use of force, physical injury, and psychological intimidation of minors." The cuffs clicked, and right there in front of hundreds of students, Brielle was handcuffed. No resistance, no tears, just one direct look at Principal Adams, who had just stepped out, eyes wide with horror, unaware of what had just unfolded. Brielle was interrogated at the station without a guardian or lawyer. No school official allowed inside. On the table sat 3 statements, Zach's, Jared's, and Ryan's, accompanied by falsified medical reports citing dislocation, wrist fractures, and acute anxiety. "I defended myself," Brielle said, voice steady. "I didn't attack. I protected others from being harmed." The officer shrugged. "The court will decide. But you should know those boys have lawyers, and their parents are major donors to the school district." News spread fast. The media picked it up. A short segment aired on the local news. An 18-year-old girl was arrested for assaulting 3 other students. Heavily edited video clips have sparked controversy over whether her actions were legal self-defense. Parents split. Supporters of Brielle circulated the original video and launched the hashtag #JusticeForBrielle. Critics claimed students shouldn't handle bullying with violence. At school, Alyssa and Tiana cried in the counseling office, not from fear, but helplessness. The person who protected them was being treated like a criminal. Coach Bennett called everyone he could. "I trained her. She doesn't fight to dominate. She teaches others to stand up." Principal Adams convened an emergency meeting. "If we let this system punish a student who stood up for the vulnerable, what exactly are we teaching?" The next day, Riverside County Preliminary Court. Without a private lawyer, Brielle walked into the courtroom in her school uniform. She was just a woman, quietly stepping from the back row, wearing a white shirt and a federal badge on her lapel. "I'm Amara Thompson," she said. "I represent the Youth Legal Shield organization." "You're not alone, Brielle. I've reviewed the full video and gathered testimonies, and I intend to prove this is a disguised suppression, punishing resistance with legal tools." The trial began. The prosecution showed injury photos. The defense showed unedited footage, plus over 100 handwritten statements from Milbrook students, each signed, "Brielle Johnson saved lives." Midway through, Amara delivered a line that froze the entire room. "If defending others from abuse is now a crime, then this system isn't just broken. It rewards the powerful for crushing the powerless." The court had not reached a verdict, but the nation had already made up its mind. Brielle Johnson was no longer just a girl who knew self-defense. She had become a symbol for a generation that had had enough of silence, cowardice, and rules designed to protect privilege. Riverside County Preliminary Court. Day 3 of the hearing. The courtroom was so silent you could hear the soft scratch of a fountain pen against paper. The prosecution continued presenting a string of clipped video segments highlighting the moment Brielle locked Zach's shoulder and brought him down onto the concrete. But attorney Amara Thompson didn't object. She waited calmly, then rose with composure, her eyes serene like someone who knew the tide was about to turn. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to submit new evidence. A video that has never been shared on social media." Source, the judge asked. "Security footage from a convenience store located 15 meters from the scene. It was voluntarily provided by the store's manager and verified through a chain of custody. Its authenticity has been legally confirmed." A technician walked forward and plugged in a USB. The lights in the courtroom dimmed, and the footage began. Overhead view. Clear image. No sound, but enough to show everything objectively and unedited. 0, 0, Three boys from Riverside High approach Alyssa and Tiana. 0003. Jared snatches Tiana's backpack and throws it into the street. Ryan laughs, pointing. Zach corners Tiana against the bus stop wall. 0006. Brielle enters the frame. She doesn't attack. She places a hand on Zach's shoulder, says something, and points toward a camera on the roof. 0009. Jared lunges at Brielle. She shifts sideways and pulls Alyssa behind her. 0011. Zach throws the first punch. 0013. Brielle dodges and locks his arm precisely with control. 0020. She lets each opponent fall, but never strikes again once they cannot continue. 0026. Brielle steps back and checks on Alyssa and Tiana. No words, no boasting, no filming. Final shea. She calmly walks the two girls away from the scene, straight-backed, unhurried. The courtroom was still, so you could still hear someone inhale. No one dared call it assault anymore. Amara approached the bench and placed her hand gently on the defense table. Your Honor, this is not violence. This is the final line of defense in a society that has remained silent for far too long. The prosecution raised a weak objection, but the balance had shifted. At that moment, a hand rose from the back row. A slender woman in a security jacket stepped forward. I'm a guard at Maple Market, she said. I was there that day. I wrote an internal incident report, but no one ever called me. The judge nodded for her to continue. I saw everything. I stayed silent because I knew the boys' parents had power. But today, I can't stay silent any longer. That girl isn't a troublemaker. She's the reason those two kids weren't hurt that day. After her testimony, Amara turned toward Brielle. You fought better than any lawyer I've ever met, and now justice is finally starting to listen to you. That day, the judge dismissed all charges and ordered an investigation into the prosecution's false testimonies. The system cracked open. The name Brielle Johnson became a symbol not of violence, but of courage, which was shown when needed. 3 weeks later, Milbrook High School courtyard under the morning sun. But this time, no suspicious stares, no whispers, no downward glances, only thunderous applause as Brielle Johnson stepped onto a small stage set up in the center of campus. The ceremony for the new policy launch, the Milbrook Stand-Up Initiative, was held with more pride than graduation day itself. There were district officials, parents, reporters, and over 800 students. Principal Rachel Adams stepped back from the microphone and gestured toward her. The only person worthy of opening this new chapter is the one who dared to stand up when everyone else stayed silent. Like everyone else, Brielle wore a white blouse, black slacks, and her student badge. But today she was no longer just a student. She looked down at the front row, Alyssa, Tiana, Coach Bennett, and even the ones who once stayed quiet are now watching with eyes full of respect. I never wanted to be the center of attention. I just wanted to study, like the rest of you. But some days you're forced to become the microphone when no one else will speak. I'm not a hero. I'm just the result of too many silences I've survived, and I know what it feels like to stand alone. But today I'm here to say we can change that. You don't need to be stronger than everyone, just brave enough not to bow to what's wrong. The entire courtyard erupted, but that wasn't the peak. A few days later, New York City, National Youth Education Summit. The Grand Hall of the Jacobs Speaking Center was packed with educators, policymakers, and hundreds of students from across America. On the main stage, alongside keynote speakers, CEOs, child rights advocates, psychologists, stood Brielle Johnson, 18 years old, black, a high school senior, a black belt in karate, a survivor of institutional bias. I was once arrested before my school for protecting others, but justice prevailed thanks to a camera out of their control and a security guard who risked her job to tell the truth. I don't tell my story for sympathy. I tell it for those crushed by systems that say they're wrong for resisting. You're not crazy. You're not the problem. You're just living in a time not yet ready for your truth. And if we have to wait for change, then we are the ones who must start it. As Brielle stepped off stage, a student from Georgia ran up and hugged her. You're why I filed a complaint against my basketball coach. A teacher from Minnesota said I want to make your story part of our school's life skills curriculum. A documentary filmmaker handed her a card, eyes glistening. If you're willing, we could let millions hear this truth. Back at Milbrook High the next day, a new class opened, Karate for Confidence. Not to create fighters, but to teach students how to stand tall, look forward, and keep a steady heart even when alone. On the chalkboard was a small message written in white, inspired by Brielle Johnson. This was not just the end of a bullying story. It was the beginning of a generation that knew how to say no. With their hands, their minds, and their quiet, unshakable courage,